Welcome to the show, James.
Nice to be here, JD. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, of course. Well, you had asked me before we got started what prompted me to start this podcast.
Yeah.
I started it 3 years ago. It'll be mid July of 2021 is when I started it. My wife and I opened up a meeting center in where we live, and we hosted meetings like mental health meetings, chronic pain, MS, NA, AA. What else do we have? LGBTQIA meetings. We had a bunch of different meetings that we hosted there every day.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we couldn't keep it open because we couldn't raise funds and we were funding it ourselves, which was hard to keep it open. But the name of the meeting center was MJ's Progress, Not Perfection. So, in order to try to drive funds into it, I started this podcast out of there. Originally, it was out of one of the rooms. I turned it into a little studio, and the idea was hopefully we can generate some money from the podcast into the keep the meeting center going. Well, we couldn't do that. We couldn't drive funds, so I kept this podcast going because it was helping people. I started reaching people across the world that were being on my show. I've had I don't know 10 from Canada. I've had Costa Rica. I've had Ireland. I've had like 5 or 6 from the UK. I've had Netherlands. I've had 2 from Australia. I just had one from Colombia the other day. So I'm reaching all of, as much as I can when it comes to hearing these stories. But what happened early on was I was like 2 months into it, and I'm an addict. So of course, like I'm so worried about the numbers and how many viewers I'm getting per episode and all that shit.
Yeah.
And I was getting really frustrated when it wasn't moving the needle enough to where I wanted it to be.
Right.
And I got a message at like, I don't know, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And from someone I didn't know saying, "Hey, I'm from the UK. I just watched this episode with Abby. And then I watched another 8 episodes. And I just wanted you to know I'm going to rehab tomorrow now."
Wow.
And that kept me going to this day to try to reach one person and not care as much about the numbers. And when I stopped caring about the numbers improved.
Of course.
More people were tuning in, and the bigger the outreach, the more across the world I was reaching when it came to viewers. This used to be on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts, but it got to be too much work, and I'm not getting paid, so I'm just doing this, for fun. This is my sober hobby, and it keeps me sober. I do NA 5 days a week, and I do Gamblers Anonymous on the weekends. But as you know, a meeting is two alcoholics having a conversation, and that's a meeting. So, when I record these in bunches, sometimes I'll record 7 in a day. That's like hitting 7 meetings in one day.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm releasing a new episode every day from Thanksgiving Eve to New Year's Day to raise awareness around relapsing during the holidays.
That's a really good topic. Yeah.
So to raise awareness, I'm going to release a new episode every day, which means I have to record a lot of episodes. Yeah. And I work 40 hours a week. So on my 3 days off, I fill them with doing these interviews, or I get done work at 6:30 at night. Like this is a nighttime, so I'm recording this after I worked an 11.5-hour day. So I fill them in where I can, man. Trying to put as many stories out there as possible and hope that one story reaches that one person and, more watch or listen, and even better. My favorite question to ask is, what's your sober date?
But my sober date is January 21st. It was 2011. So 13 years coming on 14.
What was going on January 20th of 2011?
Well, I'll tell you what happened the week before. I guess it was a couple of weeks before that. I live in Denver, Colorado, and I'm originally from Kansas City. And I went back to Kansas City for a New Year's party. and these bunch of old friends. You know, everybody's grown up, married, kids, all that stuff. And I just got stinking drunk. I got hammered. And this buddy of mine came up to me and he said, you know, my wife and I want to drive you back to your mom's. I was staying at my mom's house. And I said, yeah, that's fine. But I just realized when I was driving back from Kansas City a few days later, I was just like, I was super down. And I realized nobody is partying like me anymore. You know, we did that when we were young, but nobody is doing that. And I'm still doing it. And what is wrong with this picture? And what I soon came to realize is that I was an alcoholic. So I put it off for a couple more weeks. And I had, a few years earlier, I had played golf with this guy. I worked with his wife. And we were at a golf tournament or something. And I said to him, maybe we should have a beer at the turn. And he said, oh, I don't drink. And I said, really? Tell me about that. I'd like to know. And so he shared his story with me. And I vividly remember at the end of it, he looked at me and he said, if you stop drinking, it will set you free. And so when I had returned back to Denver and I was still feeling pretty down, and my then wife and I had gone out with some friends and had another cocktail. And then the next day I just called this guy and I said, hey, I need to get set free. I'm an alcoholic and I just don't have any control over it. So that was the beginning of my journey in AA, and he became my sponsor.
Well, how old are you now?
I am 64.
Okay, so you were 50 years old partying like you were 25 years old.
I'm afraid that's true, JD. Yeah, and you know, I just thought that was okay. I thought it's New Year's, everybody's going to be partying like that, and they weren't, you know. And I felt foolish, and I also felt very alone. I was very depressed, and I was the drive between Kansas City and Denver it's about 600 miles, and it's a straight drive.
I was going to say, that's it. Were you doing that drive by yourself?
Yeah, I was by myself.
That's a lot of self-reflecting.
Yeah, and I kept thinking, you know, if I drove off the road here, no one would give a shit. And that was very, very somber. That was a sad feeling.
You know,
so
that's how I was planning on going. When at the end of I've been clean from opiates for almost 7 years.
Oh, wow.
And thank you. And my opiates were causing me, you know, horrible depression, wanting to kill myself. And I was picking out trees that like I could go into, and nobody would think. And I would go out when it was like pouring rain, like I'm gonna get cigarettes, and I'll go in the pouring rain. And if I could talk myself into it, nobody would think that I did it on purpose. It would just look like a bad car accident gone wrong.
Yeah.
And you know, I didn't want to kill myself because I had a fiance kill herself, and I didn't know how to take that. And I spiraled after that. So I didn't want somebody else to spiral after I killed myself. So I figured I'd make it look like an accident, and nobody would be the wiser, and just, you know, bad luck. And I started driving with my dog with me, so that I wouldn't do it, because I could hurt myself all day long, but I'm not going to hurt my dog.
No.
And that was the only way I could trust myself to drive, is if I brought her with me to do my drives. So I know that feeling of like, if I just go off the road, I can really make this go really quickly.
Yeah. I felt despondent, just like I've messed up my life. And there had been other times in my life where I had stopped drinking, and actually, but I wasn't in AA. And a couple of years prior to that, I went 479 days without a drink. And a buddy and I went to the Grand Canyon, and we hiked down, and then we came back out a couple of days later, and we had it all planned. You know, we were going to party after that. This guy and I had partied a lot. I'm still really good friends with him. I don't party with him anymore, but and we got to the bar on the south rim of the Grand Canyon, and I ordered an Arizona Pilsner. It happened to be the anniversary of my father's death. And I just, I thought, well, here's one for Dad. And as soon as I took that first sip, I absolutely knew definitively for the first time in my life that I was an alcoholic. And I knew that I would not stop drinking for the next 2 or 3 days. And that's exactly what we did. We just went on a bender and
let's rewind it even further back, Gene. Where are you from originally? Kansas City?
Yeah, I grew up in Kansas City. Yeah, on the Kansas side, and I've lived at several different places. After college, I led tour groups, so I traveled all over the world. I did that for several years, and then I went to graduate school in Washington D.C. I lived there a couple of years.
Growing up, what did you discover first, drugs or alcohol?
They were close. Probably a little bit alcohol, a little bit prior to marijuana, a little bit earlier than.
You know how old you were?
Yeah, I can remember the first time I got a buzz from alcohol, and I was, I wanted to say I was 13 or 14, and I can't remember exactly what the occasion was, but there were a bunch of young people, and my parents were having a party. And I remember I came back to their party, and I was kind of the life of the party because I was a little bit tipsy, and it felt so good. And then it became sort of like, hey, let's drink some from the parents' liquor cabinets and things like that. And my parents were not heavy drinkers in any way at all, but I have subsequently learned that particularly on my mother's side, there was alcoholism going way back. So, excuse me, I've carried on that family tradition, unfortunately. Yeah, so that was about the first time.
Yeah, we have a bunch in common already. Because my parents weren't big drinkers, but they knew how to throw a party. Yeah. So there would always be leftover liquor from the parties, and they would just store that in the basement and not even pay attention to it. And when I was 11, my friend and I would sneak down there and make Captain and Coke and watch movies. And by the time I was 12, I was drinking alcoholically because I was bullied in school. I had lost a friend to a car. He was hit by a car, and I didn't know how to process grief. And so I remember definitively saying to my friend, like, hey, if we drink, we're going to feel better. And that's me. I wasn't drinking daily at 12, but that's me drinking like an alcoholic because I'm drinking for the effect to numb and not to have a good time. And that became a pattern and throughout my teenage years of me drinking. And you had mentioned you moved all over the place. I lived in 5 different states while I was in addiction. So I can relate to living all over the place. So yeah, my parents weren't big drinkers either. Were you a big drinker in high school?
Yeah. Yeah. We started drinking in high school in Kansas. At that time, you could get 3.2 beer, which was 3.2 alcohol instead of 5, like most beers. And you could drink that at 18. And, by 16, we had found the 7-Eleven where you could get beer. So we were drinking beer at 16. And then that continued. I don't know if I drank alcoholically then, but we did. Well, probably we did, but I got drunk. We would get drunk, and my parents kind of, they wanted us to be safe. And so they would say, you can come to our house. We'd rather you drink here. We know you're going to drink, so drink here. So
do you have siblings?
I have an older sister. Yeah.
Okay. So they had already learned that you're going to drink anyway, so we might as well do it safely here.
Yeah. And we did do that a lot, but we would also go out. I mean, we did a lot of drinking and driving at a very young age. And then in college, it just amplified. I was in a fraternity, And that was in the early 80s.
I've seen Animal House.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And it was that lifestyle was so accepted. I mean, that's how you live. We party like madmen. I lived in a big house. There were like 100 other guys.
Do you think that movie spawned more drinking at fraternities?
Oh, hell yes.
The movie takes place in 1963, but it came out in 1978. So if you're in college in the 80s, I can only imagine that the drinking has been amplified because of what that movie is portraying.
You are absolutely spot on, JD. That is exactly right. And we'd throw the toga parties. We'd do that. It was just a lot of, it was very accepted. Everybody partied like that. I'm sure some people weren't, but in the Greek system and where I was in college, it was a big party, and I took full advantage of it. That's for sure.
What made you want to join the frat?
I didn't really intend to do that, but there were guys that were 2 years older than me in high school, and I really looked up to these guys. So when I was a sophomore, they were seniors, and a lot of these guys ended up in this fraternity at Kansas University, KU, and I got invited to some of the parties, the rush parties, and seeing these guys who, in my mind, were kind of superstars. I think that year their team had won the state title in high school football, and so these guys were big in my eyes. And then, having the chance to join the same fraternity as them was kind of a big deal to me. So that's how that came about, and I enjoyed it. But it's because we were partying a lot. But there were also other things about it that I also enjoyed.
So you went you graduated from Kansas University?
I did, yeah. In 1983, I graduated. Then I started doing the job where I traveled quite a bit. I led tour groups for several years, and then
What's a tour group?
Excuse me?
What's a tour group?
Well, they were escorted tours. So you'd have a group of like 40 older people at that time. They're my age now, but they seemed older then. And we'd go on like a week-long tour, seeing the sights of Arizona or California, and then I started doing trips abroad. I went to then the Soviet Union and China, Central Asia, a lot of interesting places. And so that was a great experience. And I felt very young because I'm taking 70-year-olds around or 75-year-olds. And so I started drinking martinis. So I would appear to be older and more mature to them. And, that was just stupid, but that's what I did. And so I did that for a while. And then I think things kind of, when I went to graduate school, we still partied, but it wasn't quite to the level it was when I was in undergraduate. It was just a very different type of school, but I don't know. I didn't live on campus. I lived off campus. I went to school, this type of thing. I was 30, 28 or something when I started. So I was a little bit older than the typical student.
What were you going to school for, graduate school?
I was studied journalism. I have a master's degree in journalism and public affairs from American University in Washington, D.C. And I loved living there. I lived in a house with a bunch of people. A couple of them are still friends of mine today. And, we partied a lot, but it was just different. I mean, we were in college. You're not a grown-up, right? You don't have a lot of responsibilities. But at that time I did. I worked. I had to go to work. I had the heavy load at school. We were reporting, that was part of school. They just treated you like a reporter. They'd give you an assignment. You'd go to Capitol Hill, you'd cover something and then write it up. It was a great experience, I think. And then I worked in television news for a while, and I met the woman who would become my wife, my future ex-wife. And I think I think there was a certain amount of, by the time that she and I got married, I had left journalism and I'd gone into marketing. And then, you're married, and my life was so different. I had traveled all over the world. When you're a journalist, you experience a lot of different things. And then I got married and I was in marketing, and it was, it was just it was a much more sedate life. It wasn't as exciting to me. And I think I just started drinking more and more at that point, and kept going for, a long time, unfortunately.
Yeah. And did you have any kids?
No kids. We didn't have kids. I've got nieces and nephews, but we did not have children of our own. Yeah.
Yeah. And your drinking was escalating as your 30s went on?
Yeah, I think we lived in Memphis, and then we moved to Colorado, and I knew some people out here, and I started working with a friend of mine. We had an advertising agency, and we partied very, very hard. We partied like madmen, and
I was just going to say, just like Mad Men.
Yeah, we did a lot of drugs. We were doing
advertising and drinking all the time. I mean,
yeah, and we were doing pretty hardcore drugs too. We did a lot of cocaine, and that would prompt us to drink even more, and it was
alcohol and Coke mix so well together.
Yes, they do.
Once you tell me that you like Coke, it's like, okay, alcohol makes a lot of sense then too, because people that like Coke love alcohol. Yeah. And it's, I've heard so many times on the show somebody saying, oh yeah, and I liked Coke. I'm like, well, how much did you like alcohol? Because if you're doing Coke, you're most likely drinking with it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember one time a buddy helped me move. I got a job in Arkansas, and I was moving down there, and I don't know who came up with it, but we had a ton of Coke and we had a ton of beer, and it just, it went all night. That's what we did. And it's kind of embarrassing to say that now. It's like, holy cow, what was I thinking? But, I'm an addict. I'm a drunk.
Yep.
I'm an alcoholic.
I always say in my meetings, I talked about it today, I'm addicted to the word more. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's more drugs, more alcohol, more gambling, my codependency with my wife, I mean, it's more. Yeah. And whatever is filling that void in that very moment, more podcasts that I'm doing, all these, I'm addicted to the word more. And it's something that I'm always going to be bad on. I'm always going to be in recovery because I constantly need to work on myself because I am not perfect.
Yeah, well, yeah. And I think that's been the real gift of AA. And my experience in AA has been mostly about humility. It has just been, and I started getting the idea of that very quickly. Like, wow, you're not a very humble person. Maybe you need to learn how to be humble. And that once you start down that path, you get the lesson over and over and over and over. I'm still getting it, but it has. I'm definitely not how I was when I went in there. I'd made a ton of mistakes, had done some dumbass things, and it was just time to get humble and time to admit, like, I don't have all the answers. I don't have hardly any answers, and that's been great. And I also teach meditation now, and I started doing that about 5 years ago, and that has really amplified the 11th step for me and helped me seek and sometimes make a conscious contact with a higher power. And so meditation, I think, has helped me. I think it's helped my sobriety journey quite a bit, actually, because you sit quietly and all these thoughts come to your head, and you're not attaching to any of them. And it just has a number of really powerful benefits, not only mental benefits, but it has a lot of health benefits too. But that's been a big game changer for me. And I have a group of people that I meditate with every Wednesday morning, people that have had some heart issues. And, that's a big joy in my life to lead that Wednesday morning meditation. I love doing that. And I really enjoy the people that I've connected with through that too.
That's the one thing I struggle with the most is meditation.
Why?
It's hard for me to like sit still with my thoughts sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I start getting anxious.
Yeah.
And it's one thing that I wish I was better at. My wife meditates. She does. I do NA and I do GA. She does recovery Dharma, which is a Buddhist approach to recovery. And they meditate for like 10 minutes at every single meeting that she's in. So there's a ton of experience that my wife's getting by doing those meditations. And, she has MS. So she deals with a lot when it comes to, she's sober 4.5 years. And dealing with MS, dealing with everything else that comes along with the thoughts and, the brain and everything that happens and the change. So seeing them do recovery Dharma so well, I'm really happy because, it gives me something to strive towards. Like, okay, they're doing it right. How can I be doing this better for myself, and try to like take things from, have them teach me maybe how to do this because I can't do it on my own.
Right. No. And I also think when you sit and you can be quiet and you can be comfortable with it, and I understand what you're saying. Not everybody is comfortable with that. But the really, I like what I hear about your wife doing 10 minutes like that at a meeting. That's a great way to go about it. And you can just do a couple of minutes or even a minute and then just start expanding that from there. Go a little bit longer day by day. And I will say that anybody that I have taught meditation to or worked with who has stuck with it has benefited from it. And I can see how I benefited from it. I work with younger guys, and we just started this business, and I can. Part of it is age. Obviously, I'm older than them, but we are just able to. I can see how I was when I was that age, and some of the hangups they have, and some of the things they struggle with. And it's a very different time than when I was young 30 years ago, the age they are. But it also helps me realize, wow, I have come a long, long way in my sober journey. Because that influences everything. That sober journey influences everything. It influences how you respond in your business life or your work life. It influences, obviously, your personal relationships. It influences your relationship with a higher power. So, it's been great to understand that there has been progress. There hasn't been perfection, but there has been progress. That's for sure.
So in your 14 years, well, you're 13 and change, when did you realize that you could start meditating and turn it into a business?
Well, I wouldn't really say it is a business. I'd like to do more of it. And I just started putting out that I would like to teach meditation at business retreats, corporate retreats. Companies put on retreats. And they're always looking for different things to do. And I thought, well, this might be a good way to do that. I just felt like the reason I became an instructor, and I had meditated on and off for a number of years, the reason I became an instructor and deepen my knowledge is because I wanted to make myself do it every day. And if I was an instructor, I had to walk the walk. I had to do it every day. And then my interest from that has expanded into breath work, and there's just a lot of interesting things that have come about from that. And it's a natural type of progression. I mean, when you can get into meditation and understand that you're surrendering, like we do, you start realizing that meditation is going to take you wherever it wants to take you. And you don't have to worry about where it's going to take you. It's going to take you exactly where you need to go. And when you start understanding that, you realize there is no ceiling to this. There is no bottom to this. You can go as far as you want with it. And that's what I really love about it. In your meditation practice, I think sometimes people think, oh, I meditate and it's this and this, but my meditation practice changes all the time, and not necessarily because of anything I'm doing. It's just because you're realizing new things or you're experiencing different types of emotions and feelings. And so it's a journey into itself. And it's a really, really beautiful one. And I would love to help more alcoholics meditate. And one thing about alcoholics, they all know about meditation because it's in the 11th step. We all talk about it.
It's all through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our heart.
Yep. Exactly right. And I think that people maybe kind of correlate meditation and prayer as being the same thing. They're not at all. But I think my own experience has been that as a meditator, I feel like that has helped my program. And I would like more people to do it.
I was told early on that prayer is seeking or asking, and meditations for listening.
Yeah. And it is proven when you can sit and be silent, there are so many physical benefits that are profound. Your blood pressure slows down, your heart rate slows down, you relax. You're generating anti-aging hormones. You're actually slowing down the aging process by meditating. And when you can get comfortable with that silence, that is one of the best places in the world to be. But for me, I love to be able to sit and be quiet and just whatever is rising up in there, let it rise up. It's great.
Yeah, I liked what I was good at was driving with complete silence. And I used to what I said about my long drives, I used to drive almost 2 hours. I lived in Amish country in Pennsylvania, and I would drive 2 hours to South Jersey, where I'm from, to get pills and then drive back again. And that's where I was taking my dog with me on the rides because I didn't want to talk myself into something stupid while I was doing that drive. And I knew I'd be safe with her in the car. She's about to be 13 soon. So she's still going strong. But when I got sober from opiates, it'll be 7 years in April. And when I got clean from opiates, I found a meeting about an hour away. And I would go to that meeting twice a week because I wanted to drive as far for my recovery as I drove for my addiction. And, I would drive home from the meeting with my radio off and the windows down and just replay the tape of what I just listened to in that meeting. What did I learn? What am I grateful for? And do a lot of things while I drove with the radio off. And I always felt a connection to my higher power when I did that. And I felt like I was AA. I was a first and AA guy. I haven't had a drink. It'll be 5 years at the end of February without a drink. Thank you. But when I relapsed after my dad passed away last June, I relapsed with weed and I relapsed with Valium, benzos. And I was over medicating both weed and benzos. And then finally I, cut them both off April 1st of this past year. So, I have over 7 months now clean from weed and benzos. And when I went back into it, I decided to try NA this time because I had already been through the steps of AA and I still found myself relapsing. And I'm an alcoholic, but I'm a drug addict too. And I need to be able to talk about those drugs openly. And in AA, I'm trying to respect the rules of confining your discussion to alcoholism and how it pertains to alcohol.
Yeah.
And I did go to a lot of AA early on, and I just felt like I was stifling myself because I wanted to talk about the drugs too. And so I found myself a great NA meeting, and I started doing that instead, just because it's what I need in this moment is to go through the steps in AA and go through the steps in NA as opposed to AA.
Right.
Then I found myself gambling every day. I found myself gambling every day on baseball. Because it's one thing to bet on football. It's on once a week, twice a week at the most. But then when the football season ended, baseball comes on, and that's on 7 days a week. That I
Yes.
found myself betting 7 days a week.
Wow.
And finally, my wife's like, "Where is this money going?" And I had to come clean about my gambling. And so I do GA on Zoom every Saturday and Sunday at noon, and it's a meeting I found based out of Las Vegas because I figured if anyone can stop gambling, it's people from Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So I attend their meetings on Saturdays and Sundays every day at noon, and it's kind of like been great. I haven't placed a bet since July 13th. So, it's funny how similar all the fellowships are.
Yeah.
The steps are the same in all three fellowships. You're just changing some words around. Instead of we were powerless to alcohol, it's we were powerless to drugs, but everything else is the same basically. And so it's funny because like I understand NA because I've already been through the steps of AA. The only difference is NA, there's like a thick workbook that you have to go through, as opposed to AA, I could go through step 1 through 3 in a night.
Yeah.
So I felt like I needed a more thorough go through this time around. But I'm addicted to more
Yeah.
whatever's filling that void, man.
Yeah, I've never heard it phrased that way, but that's a good way to phrase it, because I think we all are. I mean, we get a little obsessive about things. You want to, no matter what it is, it's like, oh, I want to do that, and then you dive in deep, and
Whether it's going to the gym, that can be when you get sober and you start working out 7 days a week.
Yeah.
You're putting that energy elsewhere.
But I am learning about that, the value of rest. It makes a big difference. I mean, you actually do better if you rest and get some time between workouts.
But yeah, you had said you went through a divorce. Was the divorce while in recovery or divorce while you were still drinking?
No, it's during recovery.
Okay.
Yeah. And it wasn't a very friendly divorce, unfortunately. But I do give my ex-wife credit. I mean, she supported me when I made the decision to get into AA. And I distinctly remember coming home one night and just saying to her, yeah, I don't really think I need this. I don't really think I'm an alcoholic. And she just looked at me and smiled. And she said, I think you're right where you need to be. So that was very helpful for her to kind of point that out. And I've never said that again. I've never felt that way again. What's that?
Yeah. So that was a kick in the pants that you needed to stick around.
Yeah. I'm glad I stayed. Now, it was during COVID. I didn't go to many meetings, and I didn't care for the online meetings. So that was kind of a weird period. I mean, everything was weird then, but the AA was not that great for me, at least, in that just doing it that way, I didn't really enjoy it. But now I'm in the first AA meeting I ever went to 14 years ago. I go to that same room today. It's a different meeting, but I've been going to this same church in the same room every Monday night for 14 years. And now the meeting that I'm in, I've never enjoyed a meeting more, and the people that are in that meeting as much as I enjoy my Monday night meeting. It's fantastic. And it's filled with a wide variety of people, young, old, very bright, people that are comfortable being vulnerable. And I was sitting there the other night at the meeting thinking, God, I'm getting exactly what I need for the millionth time. I'm hearing exactly what I needed to be hearing tonight. So that's been great because we've all been to crappy AA meetings, and I'm not one who likes to be, there's a lot of long sobriety in that group, but I'm not one who likes to hear somebody say this is how we do it and you should do it this way. I just like to hear people's stories and hear the discussion and then their thoughts and how how that you can apply that lesson to your own life.
Yeah, no, I agree more. I love hearing people's stories. That's another reason why I do this is because I'll hear people share in a meeting, and in my head I'm like, I want to hear more from that. I want to hear he just said this. I want to hear more about that. And
Yeah.
there's no crosstalk. I can't be like, hey, what's this mean? I can't do that. And
Yeah.
I love doing this one-on-one because it gives me a chance to learn from other people, to gain some knowledge that I can take for myself
Yeah.
and try to apply it to how I do this, whether it's how I interview or how I live my life or how I live my recovery.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what you mean by, getting something from it. There's meetings, whether they're new in sobriety and they're a couple days sober or a couple days clean, or if they got 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some interesting characters, and people walk into those meetings that you just think, no way, and what I'm really surprised at, and I don't know how old you are, JD.
I'm
How old are you?
38.
Okay, so you're pretty young, but there are people coming into the meeting that I go to, my home group, that are in their 20s, and I admire them so much for understanding that part of their life and how this can, being sober can be helpful. If they fall off, it can maybe kill them. But I have so much respect for those young people. And I think about myself when I'm, 22 or 23, and I'm like, the party's just getting started.
Yep.
But
I've
these
had
guys,
people on with 24 years old on the show. And I'm like, you've been sober for 4 years? I was like, I was not even in the thick of my addiction yet.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, you're talking like this with this much knowledge. I wish I had that knowledge when I was like, just stay sober because you can do a lot more in the next 10 years than I did with my 10 years in my 20s.
oh yeah, yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think everybody that starts kind of late in sobriety probably says, "Oh, wish I would have started earlier." And yeah, maybe that's so. But on the other hand, that's just how my journey was.
Yeah.
I don't. There's nothing you can do about it. For one thing, you can't go back, and so I've learned to accept that and just understand and enjoy that. Hey, I was sober in my 50s. I've been sober in my 60s now, and hopefully we'll keep going for a lot longer. That's the plan, at least.
Yep.
But day at a time.
Now, do you do the guided instructions through Zoom or do you do them in person?
The meditation,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a Zoom meeting. Yeah, and so after I got divorced, that's a very stressful thing to go through. Now, there's just no way around it. And even if it's the right thing to do, it is still a very difficult thing to do. So I don't recommend it. But shortly after that, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I started having jaw pain, really bad jaw pain. I was out on a walk. My mother and sister live in Northern California, and I was visiting, and I was taking a walk, and I had excruciating jaw pain. I had never felt like that. And I'm thinking, I'm having a freaking heart attack. But, and then I was walking around this lake, and I had to get back to my car. And by the time I got back to it, I felt okay. But that feeling kind of stuck with me. And then I was in Mexico for a month with a friend of mine, and we were walking up and down these big hills every day to get down to the beach and then walk back up. And I started thinking, this is fucked up. Something is wrong here. So Finally, after it was like 3 months after I had those initial symptoms, and I had a relationship with a cardiologist because my father had heart disease, my grandmother had heart disease, and so I went to the cardiologist, and he said, "This, something's wrong. We'll do some tests." And they ran a bunch of tests. And the last test that they ran is called an angiogram, and they run a camera up the artery in your arm so they can see into your heart to see if your arteries are clogged up. And they you're not completely out. It's that weird kind of sedative. You kind of know what's going on. But I could hear this guy, my cardiologist, say, "Okay, I've seen enough. Take him back to the room." And then I don't know how long it was that he came in there, and I was with it by then. And he looked at me and he said, "You are one lucky guy to be alive." He said, "You should be dead. You have 3 arteries. One is 100% clogged and 2 are 90% clogged." He said, I do not know how you are alive. It's astounding." And he said, "You need open heart surgery, and you need it tomorrow." And they scheduled it for tomorrow. 48 hours later, I had it. And so that changes your perspective on everything. You have your chest cut open. You have to recover. It is a long road back, and it does things to your head too. And there's depression that goes with it. I don't know anybody that has had that surgery that has not faced depression. So you're depressed, and that's why I started my Wednesday meditation group. It was for people that have had heart issues. And so most of the people in the group have had open heart surgery, or they've had an implant, things like that. And so those people are very dear to me, and I feel very, very fortunate. I feel fortunate that I feel so good after what I went through 2.5 years ago. But I also feel like just now I'm kind of getting back to where I know what the hell's going on. That I have a future in front of me, and I can get back on my feet and all that sort of thing. It's been quite a ride. But AA has been, and that's why I love that group, because that group is so supportive. I mean, we've all become, I don't know if we're good friends, but we care about each other. We really do. And it's a really lovely, lovely feeling.
But yeah, if you send me the Zoom information, I'll put it in the description of the chat, the description of the episode. So if somebody wants to join a meditation, they can find the Zoom meeting and password right in the description of the episode.
Yeah, they'd need to send me their email, and then I can put them on the list. I send out a reminder every Tuesday.
Okay, then I'll put your email address.
Yeah, if somebody wants to join that would be great. And I've been thinking about starting a separate meditation for people in AA. I just haven't. I had a Thursday night group, and that kind of didn't work out just because of everybody's schedules and things. And I live in Mountain Time, and everybody's in different time zones and things like that. But I do hope to start another group for AA people to meditate. And several people in my home group have asked me about doing something like that.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I'd love to have you there.
Well, I appreciate you sitting down with me tonight, James, and talking and telling your story a little bit.
Well, I appreciate you doing this, JD, and I think you're really providing a great service. And I of course, wish you the best of luck with your battles. And it sounds like you're making progress on a lot of different fronts. So congratulations.
Thank you. I'm working on it.
Yeah, good for you. I feel happy for you about that.
Thanks, but I'll talk to you later.
All right. Take care, JD. You have a great weekend.
You too. See ya.